What's going on, guys? MikeO back, and today I'm doing a video on grading modern baseball cards. I've had a number of people message me and request that I make a video just wanting to know what I look for in a modern baseball card when I'm evaluating whether I want to send it off for grading or not. So that's what I'm going to do. So there's 4 things that I look for in a card when I'm evaluating it, and I'll get to those in a minute. But before I do that, just want to touch on a few things that I think certain people may overlook sometimes or might not bring to people's attention. When you are handling cards that you may potentially have graded, you want to make sure you handle them with care. Hold them by the edges, hold them gently, don't drop them, don't wrap your hands around them, try not to touch the surface front or back. Also, I think it's a no-brainer, but you want to make sure your hands are clean. Wash your hands before you start handling the cards. Wash them with soap and water. Make sure they're thoroughly dried. Sounds like common sense, but a lot of people, may not think of that. Your fingers and skin produce a lot of oils, natural oils, stuff like that you want to try and avoid. And you certainly want outside stuff like food or drink away from your cards. And when you're going to look at your cards, you want to make sure you have a lot of attention to detail. You want to evaluate the entire card. You don't want to just glance at it. I mean, some people can glance at it real quick and go, okay, that looks like a 10. And you can do that if you'd wish. But if you really want to try and make sure that you're going to get the best grades possible, or that you're sending in cards that are going to get hopefully PSA 10s or BGS 9.5s, you really want to pay a lot of attention to all the details of the card. And there's a few things that I'd like to address. Pack pulled. A lot of people say, well, I pulled it right from a pack. That doesn't mean anything. That's really meaningless. Me personally, of course, if I'm opening a product and I pull this card right out of a pack, yes, I know I did that. I'm going to put it right on a sleeve. I'm going to evaluate it, and hopefully, if it's good enough, get it graded. But just because I pull a card from a pack does not mean it's going to be a PSA 10. I've seen plenty of cards come directly out of packs that are PSA 9s and 8s. So, pulling a card from a pack yourself is obviously a nice thing to do. You know how it's been handled, but don't assume it's a high-grade card just because you pulled it from a pack. And also, another tip is, look at the card, evaluate the card, and be honest with yourself. I may very well want this card to be a 10. I might want to send this in because I really want a Mike Trout sepia refractor to be a PSA 10. But if it's not a 10, it's not a 10. You really need to look at the card really well, and you need to send it in if it's the grade you think it's going to be, not because of the grade you want. So a lot of people look for a reason that a card is a PSA 10. I look for a reason why the card is not a PSA 10, and I look for the flaws, and if I see one, I put it aside and say, you know what? I think that's going to keep it from being a PSA 10. It's not worth sending in. So now that that's all said, let me show you the 4 factors when you're looking at a card. So let's zoom up on this one here. This is a Mike Trout from 2017 Topps Chrome Baseball. It's a sepia refractor. And the things you're going to want to evaluate here, of course, are the corners. And modern cards are a little easier, of course, than old stuff. But you're going to want to look at the corners. I check them out on the back. Hopefully we can keep the card in focus. Let me zoom in even a little more. So I'm going to look at the corners on the back and the front. I look at them on both sides, all 4 corners. I look at the back, I look at the front, and then I look at the edges as well of the corners, and I just really carefully look at them. A lot of the chrome products are pretty sharp, but now and then you will see corners that are just bent a little bit, and they come out of the pack that way sometimes. I also evaluate the edges of the card. So you want to check out the edge, all 4 edges. I check it out on the back of the card. I check the front, and then I kind of check the side. You're going to see edges now and then that just have a little ding in them. You're going to see rough cut edges where you'll see some white on the back, sometimes the front as well. I just make sure that the edges and corners look really good. And then I check centering. And, you know, a lot of people say, well, how do you look at centering on modern cards? Especially a lot of products now that do not have borders. You know, bordered cards are a little easier, and you can compare cards and check the front, but the front can be tough unless something's way off. But you can definitely see on the back. And what will keep this card from potentially being a PSA 10, in my opinion, is the centering, top to bottom / left to right, depending on how you're holding it. The centering's way off there. This side is, you know, obviously bigger than this side, and they should be pretty even on the Topps Chrome product. So again, you want to check out the front and back. And I don't like the centering on this card, so, you know, if I'm starting off, I look at the centering first and I just toss this one aside and say, you know what, it's not worth fooling with this one. I have plenty of others to send. And one of the important things, and one of the things that a lot of people miss out on, is the surface. And that's very key, especially with these chrome looking products. I check out the surface on the back, and I will say Topps Chrome, every now and then they do have stuff stuck on the back of them. That's just the way I've noticed from this product. You'll see stuff with roller lines in it. You'll see scratches in the card. They're all things you have to keep an eye out for. I look at these cards under a pretty good light. I have these small little studio lights set up which provide great lighting. You can probably use certain lamps, but I would use a more LED looking lamp to look at it. And, you know, I kind of will look at it straight on, but then after that I will look at it from the side and I'll just glance. You know, I just kind of scan the entire card. And then, of course, the front as well. And with the chrome products, sometimes you have to wipe them down. Sometimes you can you'll have little marks that look like, oh, is that a scratch or a scuff? And you can kind of wipe them out. But with products, a lot of modern products, especially chrome, there will be scratches that are in the card. They come right out of the pack like that. You will see little dents and dings and all kinds of issues. So it's really just important to I just usually look at the entire thing. I wouldn't just say, oh, look at Mike Trout's face. Look at that. I would evaluate the entire card and I scan it pretty good. If you do need to wipe down your cards, you want to use a really soft piece of material, microfiber, something like that. I have this little sack here that is actually made for camera lenses. It's for a camera lens that I have, a small one, and this is very soft. I do need a new one. I'm going to stop at a camera shop in the coming days because I need a few things from the camera store as it is, but I will look to see if they have a camera lens cleaner, you know, cloth to use, because I know that's going to be good enough for a card if it's good enough for an expensive lens. And then you can just wipe down the card's surface and, you know, it'll keep it clean. So obviously after you evaluate a card and if it looks good, you want to put it in a soft sleeve. And that's something you want to be careful with now too. Now I know they're putting out some with better angles on the corners, but I've done it myself where you're putting a card into the soft sleeve and you can catch the corner and that will put a little cut in the card and that will damage the card. So that's something to think about as well. And then, you know, if I have a pile of cards that I'm going to send in, I just put them into the rigid holders. I put them in there and they're ready to go. So that's just a few thoughts from me on evaluating modern cards for baseball. Vintage is a whole other ball game. You know, there's a lot to look for. Of course, with vintage, you're not necessarily looking for PSA 10s. Obviously, you'd take it. You'd love to have PSA 10s of the old stuff because they bring such premium prices, but there's a reason they go for those prices because PSA 10s in vintage cards are extremely difficult. And that's just something, you know, I think with the vintage stuff, you just got to be careful with it, picky with it. Some people just want to have them authenticated. And when it comes to grading, it's all about personal preference. It's about your collection. Some people like to have things graded because they like to put them in set registries. Some people just like the way they look in the slabs. Some people want to protect the cards by having them encapsulated. and some people just like the thrill of trying to get PSA 10s or BGS 9.5s, or whatever company you're into, SGC as well. So when it comes to modern cards, guys, you just want to take care of your cards. Don't assume a card is a PSA 10. Make sure you look it over carefully. Really pay attention to all the details of the card. And if it looks really, really good, send it in, and hopefully you get yourself a PSA 10. But it can be a lot of work, and you know, grading cards can definitely be expensive, and that's why I usually like to do my very best to make sure I have a PSA 10. You're not going to get one every time. Every now and then something's going to come back less than you'd like it to be, but that's just part of the game. So guys, I hope this video was helpful in some way. Comment below, let me know what you think. Hit the like button, subscribe, and I will talk to you guys next time. Have a great one.